The first $100,000 is a B word, but you have got to do it. Those aren't my words. That is the famous, slightly aggressive advice of the late Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's right-hand man. He didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't say the first 100,000 was tricky or annoying. He said it was brutal. And he was right. Getting from 0 to 6 figures is arguably the single hardest financial task you will ever undertake. It feels painfully slow. It feels like the math is broken. And honestly, most people quit before they ever get there, because they don't understand that the rules of money change completely once you cross that line. If you are currently sitting at 10,000 or 20,000, or maybe even negative net worth, you probably feel like you are pushing a boulder up a hill while wearing roller skates. Today, I want to show you exactly why that feeling is valid, backed by the raw math. But more importantly, I want to show you the specific mechanics of why the next $1 million is actually easier than that first chunk. We are going to break down the snowball effect, the psychological trap that catches 90% of investors, and the exact roadmap to get your hands on that first 100,000 so you can finally take your foot off the gas. Before we run the numbers, do me a favour. If you want to understand the mechanics of wealth without the hype, make sure you are subscribed. It is the best return on investment you will get on your time today. I'm Tom, and I read the financial fine print so you don't have to. Let's get into the math of why the start is so incredibly hard. When Munger made that comment back in the 90s, he wasn't saying that $100,000 was enough to retire on. Not even close. He wasn't talking about buying a Lamborghini or living on a beach. He was talking about a threshold, a specific tipping point in the physics of money. He went on to say, "I do not care what you have to do, if it means walking everywhere and not eating anything that wasn't purchased with a coupon, find a way to get your hands on $100,000. After that, you can ease off the gas a little. That last part is the key. You can ease off. Why? Because before that number, you are the engine. After that number, your money starts becoming the engine." Let's look at why the 0 to 100,000 journey feels so slow. It comes down to a simple reality. When your portfolio is tiny, your contributions dominate the growth, not the market returns. Compounding is technically working, but it is invisible. Let's say you have $3,000 invested. A 10% return, which is a great year, gives you $300. That is nice, I guess. It pays for a few grocery runs. But it doesn't change your life. It doesn't make you feel wealthy. You could save that same $300 just by skipping a few dinners out. At this stage, every extra dollar you save physically matters more than squeezing an extra 1 or 2% out of the stock market. Bankrate ran a scenario that perfectly illustrates this pain. Imagine you invest $6,000 a year. That is $500 a month. And let's assume a solid 7% annual return. At the end of year 5, you have contributed $30,000 of your own cash. Your portfolio balance sits at roughly $34,500. Do the math on that. Only about $4,500 of that total is growth. 85% of the money sitting there came from your own sweat, your own paycheck, and your own discipline. You have been grinding for 5 years, and the market has barely bought you a used car. This is the danger zone. This is where people look at their accounts and say, "This isn't working." They see 5 years of sacrifice and barely any passive income to show for it. But they are missing the forest for the trees. Here is the thing that usually causes people to fail right here. It isn't the math. It's the realization that you could have spent that money and had way more fun. You look at that $4,000 of profit after 5 years and think, I could have just bought a nicer car or gone on vacation, and my life would be exactly the same. But if you stop here, you are walking away right before the explosion happens. Because what happens next is not linear. It is exponential. And if you miss the next 3 years, you lose decades of freedom. So what changes at $100,000? The market doesn't change. The stocks are the same. But the math flips. Once you have $100,000 invested, a 7% return is $7,000 in a single year. Now, pause and think about that. $7,000. For many people, that is more than they can physically save in a year. Suddenly, your portfolio is contributing as much to your net worth as you are. You have effectively hired a second worker who shows up every day, doesn't complain, doesn't drink your coffee, and adds $7,000 to your pile without you lifting a finger. Let's go back to that bank rate example. You are still putting in your $6,000 a year. After 20 years, you have put in a total of $120,000 of your own cash. But your account balance? It's around $245,000. Over $125,000 of that is pure growth. The crossover point happens somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000. That is the moment where the money your money makes exceeds the money you make. This is the snowball Munger was talking about. He described compound growth as rolling a snowball down a long hill. You have to push it really hard at the top to get it moving. That is the first 100,000. But once it has mass, gravity takes over. You are just steering it. 4-Pillar Freedom visualized this beautifully by slicing net worth into $100,000 chunks. They found that each subsequent $100,000 arrives faster than the last, even if you never increase your monthly savings by a single cent. It might take you 7 or 8 years to grind from 0 to 100,000. That is a long time. But going from 100,000 to 200,000, that might only take 5 years. Then going from 200 to 300 might take 3 years. By the time you are looking at huge numbers, you are adding $100,000 to your net worth every couple of years just by waking up in the morning. This brings us to a controversial idea. Many people think the hardest milestone is becoming a millionaire. It sounds the most impressive. But mathematically, the gap between 0 and 100,000 is infinitely harder than the gap between 100,000 and 1 million. To get to your first 6 figures, you have to multiply your starting wealth by a factor of 100 if you start with $1,000. To get from 6 figures to $1 million, you only need a 10x return. The heavy lifting is already done. But there is a hidden enemy that makes the first phase even worse than the math suggests. There is a psychological layer on top of the math that makes this first phase a meat grinder. When you are starting out, you are battling on 2 fronts: external barriers and internal barriers. Externally, this is usually when your income is lowest. You might be early in your career, dealing with student loans, or facing high rent relative to your salary. When every dollar counts, saving a few hundred a month feels like a punishment. You are actively lowering your quality of life today for a future that feels fake. Meanwhile, your portfolio isn't big enough to give you any dopamine hits. You check your account and it's flat. It feels pointless. Internally, you haven't built the identity of an investor yet. It is easy to tell yourself a story. I am not good with money. This is too slow. I will worry about this when I make more money. Bankrate calls these the psychological obstacles keeping you from your first 100,000. You have to push through a 5 to 7 year phase where discipline matters far more than returns. But here is the good news. By the time you hit 100,000, you are a different person. You have built the calluses. You have seen the math work. You have probably survived a market dip or two without panic selling. You aren't just richer, you are harder to kill. Recent financial writers have started calling the $100,000 mark the wealth acceleration point. It is the specific level of capital that flips your growth mix from mostly savings to mostly compounding. One article I read recently put it bluntly. The first $100,000 you save isn't just a milestone. It is the point that 90% of people never reach. If you can get there, you have effectively filtered yourself out of the majority of the population who live paycheck to paycheck. You have crossed the chasm. The wind is finally at your back. Okay, so we know the math sucks at the start, and we know the psychology is brutal. So how do you actually do it? How do you haul ass, as Munger suggested, without making your life miserable? There is a very specific playbook for this, and it involves ignoring almost all the advice you hear about picking stocks or timing the market. In this phase, optimization is the enemy. Here is the brute force strategy. Step 1 is accepting that this phase is savings-driven, not return-driven. 4-Pillar Freedom ran the numbers and showed that in the first 7 years, your investment return, whether it is 5% or 10%, barely changes how long it takes to hit 100,000. The only variable that matters is how much cash you shove into the machine. This means you can stop stressing about finding the perfect ETF or the next crypto moonshot. That is a distraction. Your job right now is boring. It is the brutal basics: a high savings rate, avoiding dumb consumer debt, and maximizing your income. You cannot out-invest a low savings rate when you have a small balance. Step 2 is treating this like a non-negotiable mission. Remember Munger's line about walking everywhere and using coupons? He didn't mean you should literally starve. He meant you need to be temporarily extreme. You have to be willing to live below your means for a concentrated period of time to get the snowball rolling. This season of sacrifice won't last forever. That is the key mental switch. You aren't signing up for a lifetime of misery. You are signing up for a 3 to 5 year sprint to build a foundation that will serve you for the next 50 years. If you can lock in a 40 or 50% savings rate while you are young or before lifestyle creep sets in, you can cut that 7-year slog down to 3 or 4 years. The hardest part of going from 0 to 100,000 is that your income is usually at its lowest point. So you have to pull every lever available. People who hit this number fast usually do 3 things. 1. They aggressively increase income through job hopping or side hustles. 2. They keep their lifestyle fixed even when they get a raise. They don't move into the luxury apartment the second they get a promotion. And 3, they dump every single windfall, tax refunds, bonuses, birthday money, straight into the market. They don't treat that money as fun money. They treat it as bricks for the fortress they are building. I can hear some of you shouting at the screen right now. Tom, Charlie Munger said this 30 years ago. $100,000 isn't what it used to be. Inflation has killed this advice. You are partially right, but mostly wrong. The specific number has changed. Adjusted for inflation, Munger's 100,000 is probably closer to 200,000 or 250,000 today. But the principle is timeless. The physics haven't changed. Whether your number is 100,000, 200,000 or 50,000, the shape of the curve is the same. The first meaningful chunk of capital is always the hardest, because it relies entirely on you. You can pick your own hard number based on your cost of living. Maybe for you, the snowball starts rolling at 50,000. The point isn't the digit on the screen. The point is reaching the velocity where your money starts working harder than you do. Do not let inflation be an excuse to not start. If the finish line moved further away, that is just more reason to start running today. To wrap this up, I want to give you a simple mental model to carry with you. Think of your wealth journey in 3 distinct phases. Phase 1 is the muscle phase. This is 0 to 100,000. The reality here is that returns don't matter much. Your job is to build the muscles of budgeting, saying no to consumerism, and increasing your income. Your mindset should be, this feels unfairly hard, and that is normal. Phase 2 is the snowball phase. This is 100,000 to 500,000. Here, compounding becomes visible. Your job is to stay invested and not break the machine you built. Phase 3 is the acceleration phase, 500,000 and up. Here, your portfolio moves by tens of thousands of dollars on a random Tuesday. This is where you have earned the right to rebalance your life versus your money. If you are in Phase 1, don't get discouraged by the lack of progress. You are building the foundation of a skyscraper. Of course you can't see it above ground yet. You busted your tail to get to 10,000, then 20,000. Those weren't pointless. Those were the training arcs. Now, pushing to 100,000 flips the script. It is the gateway to the world where money is a tool, not a master. Munger was right. It is a B word. But it is the most important B word you will ever conquer. I want to hear from you in the comments. Where are you on this curve? Are you in the muscle phase, the snowball phase, or have you hit acceleration? And if you have passed 100,000, did you feel that shift where the math started helping you? Let's get some peer review going down there so people can see this is real. If you found this helpful, hit that like button so the algorithm shares the math with more people.